Yeah, g'day everyone and welcome back to the TryPod Live with Winnie and Clarkey. We're here live for our round 15 recap show. We'll go over our best bets and all the action we just saw in the footy. Let's welcome in my co-host Winnie. G'day mate, how are you? And how did our best bets go this round?
Mate, I'm a bit deflated after today. I was really hopeful coming in. We had Dragons plus 7.5, where I bought the 10 cents, but still played it when it was 6.5 market. Yet again, we beat the closing number. It closes 5.5 across the board. That has counted for one extra win among 59 best bets this season. We beat the number on every bet out of 5 this round, in fact, except for the Titans game where the line closed 2.5. We had 3.5, which is basically the same. And that's because we lost Dave Fafita. We've had a lead in every game, a position to win them all, even into the second halves in all these games. But we only went 2 and 3. Did win the mixed matchup at least, but still today, definitely another kick in the guts.
Yeah, man, it was a round for upsets, a really tough one to predict. I know a lot of people actually started the round 0 and 5 on their tips. So from a betting perspective, it was a nightmare as well and just super tough to pick these games. Let's get straight into it, mate. Game 1, the Dolphins beat the Sharkies 30 points to 28. And as I said, this was the first upset that really set the tone for this round. Dolphins get, I think, their 5th win in history outside of Queensland there. And I suppose the starting point for me in recapping this is Nicho Hynes. Because I actually did predict him to stand up and deliver a big game. There were a lot of factors I thought were in his favour in this one, such as being at home, such as being well-rested, etc. Our viewers at the time disagreed with me. They thought he would fumble under the pressure, and unfortunately, you have to say that they absolutely nailed it, and I got that one wrong. A kick and a chance to win it from the sideline. It wasn't even close. And when you look at the Dolphins and you break them down as a footy team, they don't beat themselves. If anything, you can criticize them by saying they play it too safe and they complete it too high of a rate and don't chance their arm as much as they possibly should with some of their strike. And that was shown through their 92% completion rate. So Nicho a little bit off, Dolphins up at a 92% completion rate. That opened the door. And I still think the Sharks are a better side because we did see a genuine arm wrestle there that ensued. And the Sharks did start to get on top, I felt. And I felt like they were going to come over the top and win this game. But that try from the hammer, that was freakish. That is an all-time unbelievable try. He's a genuine game breaker, and why I'm so happy for him and why it's so exciting to watch him go well is when this Dolphins inaugural roster was released, everyone looked at the top 30 there and said, they have not signed a superstar. There is not one superstar in this side. Less than 24 months later, the Hammer is now a bona fide superstar for Australia, for the Maroons, and for the Dolphins. So it was super fun to watch him score that try. And more question marks for the Sharks for me. They were genuine contenders for me winning only 4 weeks ago. From that 4-week period, I think they've gotten 1 or 2 wins, but it hasn't been the same football side that we saw early in the year, mate. How did you see this game?
Well, on behalf of Cronulla, the last month, that would be 1 win. That would include a 42-0 home demolition to Penrith. That would include a loss to Parramatta, albeit Parramatta gets a couple of important players back, but Parramatta's been beaten twice since then. And that will include this loss at home to the Finns, which is probably, well, you can't say it's the Sharks' worst loss, but the game they would have expected to win the most out of all of those. And I don't want to dwell too long on these games. I know people want to talk Origin and we wanted a swift recap. This will probably be the game I speak the most about. This was an absolute wild one. As a Dolphins fan, I should be wearing my Dolphins kit. This is one of the greatest wins in the club's, short NRL history. And I just feel the Dolphins, why you might have gone for them with the plus 8.5 would be coming off a bye, one of their strongest teams they could name, which included the Hammer coming back from Origin duty. And Cronulla was on that shorter turnaround with it being a Thursday night game. But there were plenty of reasons why Cronulla should have been up for a big performance here. It's harsh for Nicho to judge him on the final kick. When Cronulla scored it, I kind of thought, like, it's a right footer on the right sideline. Like, it's a 50-50. Then they said he was 25 of 25 at home this season, had only missed 3 kicks all year. And I thought, well, he's kicking them as well as anybody. And just the fact that the Sharks scored on the bell, you always feel like they're going to rip the Dolphins' heart out and he's going to nail it and they'll win in extra time. He misses it. I would more so look at maybe missed tackles. And I even questioned Nicho's mindset going into the game, that the fact that he already you could already read the tea leaves that Nicho was basically dropped even before the round. I think that's evidenced by the fact that Mitch Moses has lost his last 2 games. but we just had this sense that he was going to come in for game 2. And I'll get to the Origin selections and rumors. But look, the Dolphins won this game by doing, and if they hadn't done all 3, they wouldn't have got this famous victory. So firstly, the Dolphins had to play perfect for the first 30 minutes. Like, that was an outstanding first 30. It does kind of bother me that last time the Dolphins played, I was backing them as a best bet to beat Canberra at home. They couldn't do it. The next time I see the Dolphins play, they're up 22-0. The next time I see Canberra play, they're down 18-0, 22-0, whatever. But the teams will ebb and flow and go up and down from week to week. But it is kind of blowing my mind how bad these teams can be in certain moments when I need them, and then how good they can be. But okay, the start by the Dolphins was flawless. Didn't have a single error. I don't even think they gave away a set restart, didn't give away a penalty, and the Sharks were just kind of shell-shocked. You can talk about the Sharkies not coming out of the gates for sure, but the Dolphins are perfect. That builds a 22-0 lead. In some games, a 22-0 lead is going to pave the way to victory. In this game, that wasn't the case. As you said, it looked like Cronulla would not only win, but win well. Cronulla gets a couple of tries before halftime, gets in the first 3 of the second half, and actually gets in front. And at that point, you thought, well, Cronulla's really woken up here and will steamroll the Dolphins and probably still cover the line and win big. The second thing that the Dolphins did, which turned the game, of course, is the hammer try, which is, I think, the greatest individual try I've ever seen. I think there's no way they win that game without that try, given what he had to do and the players he had to beat and go on 100 meters, and the fact that it just basically decided the game. It was just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, you can't overstate what an amazing moment that was. He gets the ball, skips backwards as he catches a bomb when there's actually like a lot of pressure on him, but skips backwards to get the room to then wind up and then leave defenders grasping for grabbing at air. And even when he's beaten half the Sharks team and he's gone down the sideline, someone with the speed of hammer, and he runs with a smile on his face. Someone like him you'd think that he'd back himself for his speed to get to the try line, but he actually had the awareness to sum up the situation that Kennedy was on a beeline straight for him and actually would have got him if Hammer just pinned the ears back. So Hammer cruises and does a stutter step move to shake Kennedy before scoring. Okay, if you want to say that try won the Dolphins the game, in retrospect it did, because the Sharkies were all over him. But it didn't actually win the Dolphins the game yet, because all it did was got the Dolphins back in front. And then the final thing the Finns had to do was still hang on in the final 15, 20 minutes of this game when they were in front by 4. Eventually, they missed a couple of kicks. They missed a penalty at goal, but eventually they got a penalty, got up by 6. Even then, you could say the Dolphins hung on. They did give up a try on the siren, but as we know, it wasn't converted. So a famous win for the Finns. I couldn't be prouder.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably their best win of all time, because the Sharks were coming for them hard in that second half, and that hammer try was brilliant. I really think that was the turning moment in that game. They got the Dolphins somewhat back into it, but just enough for them to hang on, and it was a special win. Move on to the second game, mate. Cowboys beat the Raiders 34 points to 16. If you are here with us live or watching later on YouTube, you notice our usual scores aren't at the top. That is my bad. Sorry, guys. I wasn't able to get them done today. But I was at this Raiders game. I'll tell you what, Winnie, it was cold, but not the kind of cold I expected. It was a dry cold. I expected more of a Canberra, dewy surface, wet conditions kind of cold. And because it was that dry conditions, the Cowboys' attack was actually spot on. They got it right. I figured if it was that wet conditions, there'd be an increased risk of errors for the Cowboys, which would put them under pressure, but they got it right. And if they do get it right like they did, they have enough genuine superstars with 6 Origin reps to, pressure every single side in this competition. It was a game that I got completely wrong coming into this with my preview. I thought maybe the Raiders in a tight one, but that scoreline in the end, it actually flatters the Raiders. I didn't feel there was really a single portion of this game throughout the 80 where they were in control and an actual threat to win. I just felt the whole time they were holding on, and the tries they did get were kind of maybe saved grace a little bit on what could have been an ugly scoreline for them. How's this for a stat? The Cowboys had 28 ineffective track tackles. The Raiders only had 4. That's crazy to look at those scores there and think the Raiders made 4 ineffective tackles but conceded 34 points. Very, very crazy stuff, but it sums up how potent this Cowboys attack can be because they're shifting it so fast and attacking out wide that it's not coming up as an ineffective tackle because it's a straight line break for the Cowboys there. They did complete at 83%. I really want to see this consistency from them now. I want to see them build a run from this following the Origin period because they are a fun side to watch when they're one, but we are yet to see that consistency yet. And meanwhile, we look for the Raiders. How does Ricky get them to respond next week? We figured this was a game he could probably get a response out of them. Wasn't able to get it, Winnie. How did you see it?
Yeah, you're right. The score, which was 34-16, doesn't do the contest justice because at one stage it was 34-6 before the Raiders scored the final 2 tries of the game, and they were never going to mount that full comeback. And it was a really tough one to pick. And I thought that the Raiders would win the game. I'm thankful I didn't bet on the Raiders because on paper, the Cowboys have so much more ability and class. And clearly they kind of drew a line in the sand that they've been underperforming, but the team that they've got clearly had enough to win with, went down on this road trip, kind of backs against the wall as an underdog and came out dialed in. And what's really tough about this Cowboys team is that they can be such a great team. I think we all see the offensive prowess. We know that they can put on points with just about anyone in the comp. But what we don't see is this team's ability to defend when they need to, when it's an important game, when they come up against other contenders in the competition. The Cowboys' defense has been found wanting so often this year. And if there was a game where you'd probably expect a flat spot and you could actually question whether the Cowboys had any resolve left, it would be round 15 when you're the only team in the comp that had played 14 weeks straight and you had the most Origin reps. So I thought it could go kind of one of two ways, which is why I said I won't be surprised if either team wins by 20 or 30 or somewhere in between, because it just felt like a high variance game. And it turned out that the Cowboys actually caring about defense, the high variance was in North Queensland's favour, and it was a big time win.
I'll put you on the spot a little bit here. I had a look at the Raiders draw, might have been a week or so ago. Think they only play in Sydney 3 more times, and if they haven't had a bye yet, that's 6 competition points for free. How much of a chance do you give them to play finals this year? Do you think it's somewhat of a chance, or are you still ruling it out?
The Raiders.
Cowboys. They only play in Sydney.
The Cowboys.
Three or something times from this
point. No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't rule it out. Look, having all these Origin reps is definitely not an advantage, right? It's going to take extra juice out of these guys in the middle of the year. And so it is a lot to ask to make a surge. And I do feel like there've been a few must-wins this year in games that the Cowboys had to have, especially at home, and they've let those slip. And you often look back and regret those ones. But you definitely can't rule North Queensland out. You're right. The fact they've got all the buys, that will help this team freshen up and give them a chance. And again, if they can defend, they can beat anybody. And I go back to the fact that they were such a great defensive team 2 years ago, and it's a similar roster. So why would they be so much worse this year?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, for the Broncos, they were great defensively last year, but we can kind of put our finger on the reason why. We can say, well, Reynolds, Walsh, and Payne Haas have missed big games this year. Whereas for the Cowboys, it's you're throwing darts at the dartboard and hoping one lands. If you were trying to put your finger on it, I don't think they know why they can't find that consistency.
They haven't had many excuses, and they actually did have excuses this weekend, and that's why they're so tough to figure out.
Absolutely, mate. Yeah, that was another game that I'm sure a lot of people tipping and betting got wrong. That was a tough one to pick. Let's move to game 3. We had the Rabbitohs beat the Broncos 22 points to 12, and I got this one wrong again. I went against you here, Winnie. I went against our community. You guys all nailed your predictions. Everyone on YouTube, I think it was Ryan at the time, Colt, yourself. You guys were all big on the bunnies here. And I just think for the Broncos, noticeably off from the jump. They never really gave themselves a genuine shot here. They had a 64% completion rate. And although they were grand finalists last year and they do have stars on their roster, you're not going to beat too many sides with a 64% completion rate because you're putting yourself under too much pressure. They were, to their credit, they were chasing points and they were risking their arm, I suppose, to an extent. But it just wasn't working. Pushing the pass just one time too many. And they looked a little bit too desperate to try to score as opposed to sticking to a process and trying to, consistently get down their end and then attack when the time was right. So, you look at this one as well. There were 2 sin bins to Souths, but they just weren't able to execute it all, the Broncos here. They had 18 errors. Souths had 9. They gave 6 penalties. Souths gave 2. And ironically, those 2 penalties that South gave were also sin bins, I believe. So that's very unlucky for Rabbitohs, a 100% penalty to sin bin ratio there. But yeah, didn't give themselves a chance. I didn't think the Bunnies were overly exceptional in this one, but I didn't think they had to be either. Like, if you're the Bunnies, why force the issue or push the extra pass when you have a team in front of you that just keeps dropping the ball and you're just wearing them down just by playing footy? They went into halftime 18-0. They probably could have gone on with this game and gone for a bigger score line. But the fact that they've now won 3 in a row with where their season's at is absolutely exceptional. They still won this one, comfortably enough. Broncos have a bye this round. They absolutely need that. Meanwhile, the Bunnies will face a Manly side that won't have DC or Jake Trbojevic. They'll probably be without Latrell and maybe another player or 2. So they are a genuine chance to go 4 in a row now, the Bunnies winning. How do you see this one?
Olakau'atu will be out as well.
Yeah.
And another game where the team that lost scored the last 2 tries, which makes the scoreline look a little closer than it really was, because it was 22-0 to the Bunnies with like a few minutes to go in this game. They never really looked like being beaten. It just occurred to me, did my curse pass on to the SGMs, where we've actually had a really good year of SGMs, but I had a $25 odds, 25-1 in this, Rabbitohs to win at halftime, Broncos to not score 3 in a row. Broncos didn't even score 3, but we needed Richie Kennard to score, the man who scored last week. And you just figure he's playing in the back line of a team that's got some guys in great form and humming in key positions. Was in with a sniff with a couple of kicks in behind. It was a wet game, but unfortunately, South was so determined on setting up all their shape and depth to the left time and time again. I thought since Cody Walker's moved to halfback, you might get a bit more threat on the right as well. But even Cody was swinging around the back, and they ultimately got Alex Johnston, overtaking try from Billy Slater, which now brings him second all time. But you said it there about Brisbane. Okay, here's the thing. They're not as good as last year. It's not their fault. They lost Herbie Farnworth. They lost Tom Flegler. I know they've got good players coming through. You still didn't quite replace that. Broncos fans may have been a little bit too optimistic to think the likes of Palacia, Willison coming in. You're not going to miss those guys. Like Cobbo's done awesome at centre. Like, you still lost 2 world-class players. But then Reynolds is a major injury. And, of course, Walsh hasn't played the last couple of games. So it's not like Brisbane's fault that they're just not as good as people probably think they are. And meanwhile, Brisbane just caught Souths at a really bad time, because Souths are finally playing in good form, which they haven't for 12 months. But it's a similar roster. It's a similar Souths roster that led the comp a year ago. I know there's no Campbell Graham, but you got Jack White now. Why couldn't they play some good footy? And I've seen the signs, and I've been talking about Souths for the last month, and I've been on Souths as the best bet for the last 3 weeks when they beat Para. Who'd they beat last week?
Titans.
We were on them for a best bet as well. Sorry to bring it up. I wasn't doing that to rub it in. And of course, this week I should remind people: best bet plus 2.5 first half, which beat the market because it was 1.5 on game day, and of course it was 18-0. So you win that by 20 points. So that was a comfortable win. And of course, Brisbane will look forward to the bye this time of year with Origin as well. Doesn't do Brisbane any favors. On the note of Origin, Latrell, who we both would have picked on kind of trust for game 1, now everybody agrees, I think, that he's got to be there for the Blues, including Madge. You saw the photo and you heard the rumoured Blues team. We can discuss it now if you want. It's going to be the same Blues side from game 1. Well, not the same, but you start with the game 1 side. Edwards comes in at fullback. Latrell comes in at centre, where obviously you had to replace Swalei. Mitch Moses comes in at 7, so Nico is dropped. And the only other change, Connor Watson on the bench for Hudson Young's spot. So what's your instant reaction to that, Clarkie, and everyone else who's watching along? Kind of what jumped out to you when you heard that news, or if I'm breaking that news to you, what's your reaction?
Yeah, I think my reaction is it's a stronger Blues side, but it's also a lot of changing of the spine there. New halves combo, new fullback in there. And of course, they kind of had to make those changes, right? But when we finished game 1, I said, I think the Maroons' biggest strength is that they have been together for a number of years, that this spine has experience together. And I think that was the Blues' weakness. They didn't look connected in the halves. I didn't see Luai and Hines combine very well in game one, even though they had momentum, particularly to start that second half. So they do have a great opportunity now. But even someone like Mitchell Moses, coming back from injury now, I'm not seeing him connect well in the halves with Dylan Brown, let alone a new 5'8" now in Jerome Luai, which I don't think he's played with before. I think when he came in, he played with Walker last year, and maybe he played one game with Luai on his Origin debut when he broke his foot. So yeah, I think the Blue side gets stronger, but I do think that there are some question marks around how much chemistry and cohesion can they build with, some significant changes in key spots in a short time to prepare before game two. What did you make of it?
So I would have picked Moses. I would have picked Latrell. I would have picked Burton, right? And I think I would have found a place for Coruscant. Like Watson was not one of the guys I thought about picking. I understand he brings a lot of versatility. He is in good form. What I will say for Madge is you can't knock him for inconsistency, and you cannot say he overreacted, because you can actually justify every call Madge has made that he believes he picked the best team for game one, and he hasn't changed any of his thinking. Like, he wanted Edwards for game one. It's not his fault. Edwards was injured in training camp, right? He probably wanted Moses for game one, but Moses hadn't played an NRL game back off injury. He thought Robson was better than Coruscant. He sticks with that. He's trying to think. Like he thought Luai was the best choice at 6, and they had a man sent off, so he hasn't dumped Luai. He's given him another chance. So he thought he was better than Burton. He's sticking with that. He didn't pick Connor Watson in game one, but Connor Watson was also injured. So it's like he hasn't actually overlooked anybody who was available in game one. He's basically only picked guys who were injured in game one, who arguably would have been picked for that one at the start of the series if they were available. So therefore, you can say he's not rattled by the 28-point loss. If that's what you believe, that it's a totally different game with the send-off, then you don't need to change the team too much. But he obviously feels a couple of these options. He had better players who just weren't fit for game one.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's probably a fair thing to say, that they're not changes per se. It's just the players that he would have selected are now available. And for what it's worth, as a Maroons fan, I do think if game one was 13-on-13, it would have been a tight finish. Bias aside, I probably think the Maroons still edge ahead and just win. But I like the signs I saw out of the Blues in the way they were able to generate that momentum, still being a man down. So I do like that Madge hasn't also gone for wholesale changes, gone this forward's out, this forward's in, etc., etc. The changes he's made are players that he wanted originally, wasn't able to get. I really like that point you made. All right, we've got to go there. Game 4. Tigers beat the Titans 18-10, and this was the worst performance I've ever sat through by a Titans team. And I'm not kidding when I say that. I'm not adding GST or extra mayo to the sandwich. Believe me, I've sat through some really rough performances. This was the worst I've ever seen. A 67% completion rate. 9 sets was all we finished in the entire second half, and most of those were just safe sets, whereas one up off our ruck coming out of our own end. We made 9 line breaks to the Tigers 2. We missed 30 tackles. The Tigers missed 47. We had more meters, more post-contact meters, more tackle breaks. We were versing a bench that had 4 games of NRL experience with 2 debutants, and there's really just nothing to capture what happened. We lost to Souths last week, who was 17th. 1 week later, we lose to the Tigers, who were 17th, and we're now 17th. We break a lot of records for the wrong reasons. We're the team with the NRL record for most double-digit leads blown across history, and we're also the second youngest team. I believe we are now the first NRL team to lose to the last place sides in back-to-back weeks. Really, really bad. Titans moved to last on the ladder in a season where we both tipped them for the top 8. We both had our reasons. There was so much promise and belief in the signings, and I don't know what to think about that game. But I actually am happy for Tigers fans, because the disappointment I feel as a Titans fan, I know they felt it as well the last few years. They can always look back to a premiership. I wish I could do that. But Tigers fans deserve some joy, man. And Leichhardt was an awesome atmosphere. They were right behind their team, so they deserve that moment. What did you make of this game on TV, mate? No doubt super frustrating with the best bet on the Titans as well.
That's it. I was riding the Titans right there with you. My best bet was Titans -3.5. So if you want to criticize my best bets, or if I look at myself and I say, like, what am I getting wrong? 2 and 3 this week. And something I hate to do is overreact to what I've seen recently. I think that's a big mistake that a lot of general punters make, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a prisoner of the moment. But here I was, a couple of my losses this week. I've gone and played against the Tigers when they've had their worst half of footy in years, where they've come out and got smoked like 44-0 second half to the Dragons. So then I've gone against the Tigers. And then I've gone on the Dragons this week after they couldn't have looked any better last week. And of course, they're awful second half today and blow such a great opportunity to win. And those are logical picks. People can see the reasoning, but I always talk about how teams can turn it around so much, and you rarely want to play against a team off their worst game or on a team off their best game. But I didn't feel like the market had adjusted enough. And look, I stand back, and people can tell me if you disagree, but like, the Titans are the right team to back in that game. I know it's going to sound a bit silly because they lost by 8 and they were laying 3.5. But first of all, when I made the bet on Tuesday, I'm not to know that Dave Fafita's not going to be playing. Like, he's only the Titans' best player, that makes the most impact out of the guys they got left, because obviously Brimson, Tino out. That's fine. Tigers have got players injured as well. But I come in and make my best bets on Tuesday, for example, and I take the Dragons knowing that Olakau'atu's in doubt. Well, Olakau'atu plays one of the best games he's ever played of his career. I haven't seen the reports, but he's probably man of the match today, right? So you got a guy in doubt who comes out, plays like the house down. You got a guy who's in no doubt, is scratched. So that's a big loss. But look, I just watched the game, and for the first hour, I don't want to hear it from the Tigers and Benji going, "Oh, see, we've got a plan. Oh, this team's got a lot of heart." Like, okay, give the Tigers a bit of credit for hanging tough and getting the win late. But that team was ready to be blown away. That team was begging to be put away. That team was getting pulled apart like soft bread all afternoon. It just was a classic game. I can see you're so dejected, and I've talked to you, and I know you're so dejected. You outplayed them for 60 minutes. Like, you should be pissed off that you weren't clinical and you didn't put them to the sword and win the game, which you should have. But you've got it. Your team isn't that bad. You outplayed the opponent for so long. As you say, I think the stat says it all. 9 line breaks to 2. Obviously, the Titans make a clean line break and then somehow just couldn't find that last pass. And honestly, it can be such a different game. If the Titans score 1 or 2 more from those breaks, Tigers probably don't have the firepower to come back. But I just knew it. I just had this sense of dread. It's 10-4 to the Titans at halftime. Well, no, sorry, 10-6 it was. And 10-6, dragging into the second half. And the Titans keep having chances. And they don't put the Tigers away. And I just know something's going to change. The momentum will swing. The Tigers will get some try out of nowhere. And then they'll have all this, belief, and the crowd will get up. And not only did the Titans not take any of the chances to score, but then the Titans handed the game to West on a silver platter by drop after drop after drop after drop, and just invited all the pressure in. So, I'm sorry, I'm really not going to give West much credit for that victory, because you had an opponent that just refused to score against you, and then an opponent that gave you every possible opportunity at the end, and the Tigers got up by 2 points, I think. Up by 2, and then the late try, the backbreaker. But regardless whether you win by 2 or 8, and even before the Tigers did score the late try, Fafita drops a ball to go back in front. The Titans have the Tigers completely on the rack. They put it through the hands. And I don't know if it was a bad pass by Sammy or just a spill by Fafita, but they dropped the ball in a chance to score, which was just one of probably 6 blown tries on the day. So that's frustrating, but that's what you deserve if you don't put a team away. And it's another best bet where we're in a great position despite the player personnel news pre-game not going our way. But is it my fault for picking a bad team that I couldn't quite stamp on the throat? I don't know, because the Tigers have been pretty bad for a few weeks as well. But I suppose you could understand that backs against the wall, seeing this as a winnable game at home, Saturday Arvo, there was motivation that they were going to fight through, but it really shouldn't have mattered. because it shouldn't have been that close late in the game.
Yeah, I mean, the news that broke prior of Dave Fafita being out hurts, and I thought maybe the Tigers did gain a bit of motivation by knowing Leichhardt was around to stay, but I just can't make that excuse, even as a Titans fan, man. Like, the Tigers were missing Galvin, Clemmer, Papali'i, Alamalo, Bateman, Junior Tupou, Toa, Jaden Sullivan, Alex Lobb, Alex Twal. Like, there's 6 or 7 guys there that start for them. They were missing half a team and had 4 games of NRL experience on the bench when we had Isaac Liu, who has like close to 300 games, or at least 250 plus. Like, this really sucks to say, but no one will disagree with me. No other team in the competition would lose to the Tigers in that fashion except the Titans. Rabbitohs were one ahead of the Tigers coming into this round. They beat Tigers 40-0 in that game because the Tigers did give up 9 line breaks. And if it's the Rabbitohs, they're going to put them to the sword. We're the only team that could lose that. It was a really, really tough loss to take. It sucked. So let's move on to the next game. Game 5.
You and me both, mate.
Yeah, man. Like, it just, you put your time, your energy, your effort, you drive 7 hours, you cheer in the crowd, you give everything. And you just, the Titans just, sometimes it just feels like you get nothing back from this team. So Game 5, Storm beat the Warriors 38 points to 24. I think the Warriors closed as favourites from what I saw here. I was at the post-match function. They did close as favourites. I tipped them here, so I'm definitely having a rough week as far as my tips are concerned. And to be honest, their start couldn't have been any better. You know, I looked over, I saw the score, saw the Warriors were playing nice there, and I thought, well, I've nailed this prediction. But they just opened the door a little bit for the Storm. And the Storm is so classy that, you know, if your own discipline's letting you down with errors or penalties or 6 to goes, whatever it might be, you only got to leave that door slightly ajar. And the Storm players like Jerome Hughes, who's back home in New Zealand and stuff like that, they will put you to the sword. And, you know, the Storm just took their opportunities. That's how I saw this game. They went into halftime up by 6 points. I thought at that point it probably marks the end for the Warriors. I couldn't see how they could get mentally back up after such a perfect start. And then not just letting the Storm back into the game, actually giving them the lead going into halftime. But they got an early try in the second half. They still believed, but from that point, they just left that door just too far open. And you look at the stats after, the Warriors were ahead or behind in every single stat you want to be ahead in or behind in, such as, you know, missed tackles and then meters, etc., for the ones you want to be ahead in. And I think that just shows how good the Storm are. Like, they lost in this game in every single statistical area, and they still managed to win the game. And really, like, I won't say won comfortably, but won comfortably enough. I think if you're the Warriors, you just accept you're not quite at the Storm's level yet. Not many sides are. There's no shame in that. And there is still a lot of positives to take from this for the Warriors. I don't think they were horrible at all. I just thought they lacked a bit of discipline, and the Storm were classy enough to take those opportunities where other sides might not be as classy to take the opportunities. Do you agree with that, Winnie? How'd you see that one?
Yeah, just to decipher what you said, because even I was a bit confused, but you could say the Storm were inferior in every stat, right? But won. So I see what you're saying. 54% possession Warriors, 82% completion to 76, 300 more meters, 200 more post contact. They didn't have more line breaks, so give Melbourne credit there, but 20 more tackle breaks for the Warriors, more offloads. Yeah, you get the idea, right?
Yeah, more missed tackles for the Storm, etc.
Yep. Penalties conceded, that did not favour the Warriors, and that's a little part of this. Look, I called it the way I saw it Tuesday. Like, it was a great spot for New Zealand. I loved New Zealand this week. That's the type of team I always want to bet on. Not only do I find them a team that I think is going to win the game, I find plus half a try. I say that it's going to be a flip favourite by game day. The Warriors are $1.70, $1.75 by game day. Plus half a try is $1.50. We're sitting on a great bet. I could not have felt more confident. Like, even though the season's gone so bad, like, that's the type of bet that I go in and I just feel like we've got the right team. And then we're up 14-0. And I'm actually sitting going like, this was a good spot to maybe have gone like Warriors, 13 plus or even by bigger margins. Like, if you would have told me, team is going to win this game 13 plus, it's 1,000,000 to 1 that it's going to be the Storm. But the Warriors have seen some examples of this. I mean, I'll go all the way back to round 1. Out of the blocks early, 12-0 over Cronulla. On their line, chance to make it, 18-0 or more. And the Warriors don't quite put the other team away and then seem a bit stunned when the other side comes back. I mean, Warriors were all over Dragons in a game. It was only like 6-0 maybe. The Warriors didn't take chances. and the Dragons kept repelling them. And then when the momentum turned, the Warriors were a bit stunned. But how this game turned, I mean, it was a bit of a drizzly night, so kicks were hard to handle. First Storm try, bomb, Katoa steals it out of CNK's arms and scores. Next Storm try, it's off a bomb, and the Storm are in again. The next Storm try, Jerome Hughes kicks a bomb. Jackson Ford dead set is rushing to apply kick pressure, stops in front of Hughes. Hughes sees that like Jackson Ford's close to him, and dead set does like a karate kick into Ford, milks the softest penalty you've ever seen, like a joke of a penalty. Like even the commentary team were like, we just can't be calling that for contact on kick. Like it's all well and good to keep kickers safe, but if kickers know that any like contact whatsoever, anything brushing them while in the air is a penalty, but we're going to see some just ridiculous scenes. So it's just the softest penalty you'll ever find, and Hughes knows it, gets up laughing, and the Storm score there as well, and Storm scores again. So it's 4 straight tries in the first half, 20 points. I mean, you can't give that many up, but it's still anybody's game in the second half before back-to-back sin bins. And both the sin bins by the Warriors, of course, were just brain snaps. Now, I do have a bit of an issue with the first one because I'm pretty sure Meaney runs the ball to the line and spills it, and it just pops into the lap of Montoya, and Montoya is just holding the ball, and the ref's like, oh, 2 in the tackle strip. Like, I don't think it was a strip. I think the Storm just lost it straight in the defender. So while the Warriors are like, what the hell? He just dropped the ball. The Storm takes a quick tap, and Montoya can't help himself and drags Meaney down after he ran 8 meters instead of 10. Okay, 10 the bit. And then 5 minutes later, the Storm shifts, and obviously Warriors are under a bit of pressure, and DWZ's trying to shut something down and flings an arm out. It looks a lot worse. Like, I don't think it had to be a sin bin. I thought it could have been a penalty, but I think because he left his feet, but I think it was more of a lunge. He thought that the winger was going to get the ball and kind of instant reaction. Anyway, it is a bit of a brain snap, and DWZ's off as well. And the Storm puts the game to bed, in those moments. And even then, it was after the Warriors scored with like 8 to go, which did win us the mixed matchup at least. We had Warriors to have more points than Titans, which I will say at least there's a little silver lining there. Like, I liked the Warriors to beat the Storm. I was wrong. I liked the Titans to beat the Tigers. I was wrong. But I still had Warriors to outscore Tigers, and I still got that. So at least like I got both games wrong on the final result, and the mixed matchup won anyway because the second game was a lot higher scoring. So like, look, that's very little solace, but that's something. Anyway, the Warriors were still only down 1 try. And remember, we've got a half a try handicap. So they might have been down 8 or 10 points, but they were only down 1 try. So we could get the late try, we could cover, but we're just never getting those this year. And in fact, it was the Storm who had a runaway try through Farlongo, I should say. It's Farlongo, right? So this again, it looks like a bit more of a blowout score where it was closer, but that's the perfect game to back New Zealand. And at 14-0 up, they're like $1.05 in the run. And it's hard to explain, like apart from all these little moments that went against them, it's hard to explain how all of these things happen to transpire in a short period of time and flip a game. And Melbourne's a good enough team to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I just think because literally almost every single error was punished by the Storm. If the Warriors turn out that same performance, you take away 2 silly sin bins, then I still got them beating most sides of that performance. So my key takeaway is actually it just shows how smart, how well Melbourne play the game, even if, it sucks to watch with the milking of penalties, etc. They have a high footy IQ. They know when to capitalize, when to apply the pressure. And they're just a great footy side that you've got to take your hat off and applaud. Game 6 was Roosters beating the Eels 28 points to 18. I think this was probably the game I expected. I had the Roosters winning by double digits, and finally I get a tip right. I think for this one, if you take out minutes 36 to 45, which was around when Jared Waerea-Hargreaves was sin bin, the Eels do score 3 tries within that period. And I think that's the only time they scored during that game. Outside of that, they didn't really look all that dangerous. They did have their possession control of this game, so they did have the ball more and were able to use it more. But even with their attacking stats being above the Roosters in most areas, just like last week against the Bulldogs, it felt like their spine just wasn't clicking entirely. And maybe put that down to injuries, lack of game time together, whatever it might be. The Eels are in a tough spot. They're probably not in a position to rescue their season. It's probably safe to assume it's over. And since Mitchell Moses has returned, just isn't clicking in the halves. It wasn't clicking without him, so I'm not saying it's him, but I certainly think myself and a lot of people thought once Moses comes back, they'll get back to their best footy. And maybe you could say we saw it the first game he was back, but from the last 2 games, they have fallen apart. Him and Dylan Brown both scored a try, so there is that there. But, Brown's there was complete individual brilliance. It wasn't like off the back of their combination, building pressure and executing and stuff like that. For the Roosters, the discipline was bad in this one. They're certainly capable of better footy, but a win's a win. And at this time of the year, if they want to continue to push towards the top 4, they've got to be winning these games when they're coming off the bye, particularly with how poor they performed on the other side of the bye. So all credit to the Roosters. They're getting the job done. How did you see it, mate?
Yeah, the Roosters had to have that one, and that's probably why they did. They had to dig deep at the end because Parra came back. My best bet was Roosters -5.5. I'll make that Titans bet again. Like, I watched that game enough to know that the Titans could have easily won it by double digits more often than even lose, right? And I don't know if I want the Warriors bet again, but I do feel like there were enough strange moments, and I think you make a good point with all the stats gone the Warriors' way. And it's certainly a spot where, tell me if I'm wrong. If I just don't understand how it works, then don't agree with me. Don't back the tip. But like that type of game, Warriors in New Zealand with the players they had available to them compared to the Melbourne, just feel like Warriors are going to win that more often than not. And I was proven to be wrong. But then here's a game where I won, and I'm not sure if I made a great bet. Like, you tell me, because the Roosters were up 16-0, and I was like, oh yeah, finally, like this is nice easy win, like most of the best bets are when they win. Like the night before, the Bunnies, that bet wins by 20. And then I watched the next 2 games, and I watched the Titans blow a lead where they're covering the line at halftime but lose. And the Warriors, who are up 14-0, and we're getting half a try, but they lose by double digits. So I'm like, yeah, of course. We never win these narrow ones, these ones that are in the balance where one try in the last few minutes wins you the bet. We never win these. But the Roosters are going to win big. And then you're right, the game does totally turn on the sin bin. Now, before that, the Roosters capitalised on an Eels sin bin, which I just want to talk about briefly. Tuolungi tips Collins on his head, looked really bad. Now, Collins gets straight back up. I honestly think if you get done by a bad hip drop tackle or a bad lifting tackle, you really want to stay down as long as possible. I shouldn't be saying that because it's not good sportsmanship, but the smart thing is to stay down because the refs always overreact if they think there's an injury. Now, we actually saw an interesting case today where Flanagan tried to milk a penalty and stayed down. And the problem is if you're trying to milk one for a high shot, you might be sent for an HIA, which might hurt your team. But if you get tipped on your head or a hip drop, these are sometimes sin bins or worse. So I do feel like the fact that Lindsay Collins sprung to his feet when it looked terrible saved Tuolungi from a send-off. Like, I don't know if I'm overreacting here, but I watched Carl Lawton tip Cam Murray on his head and got straight sent off. I watched Nathan Cleary tip Dylan Brown on his head a couple of years ago, straight send off. And when I saw it, I'm like, that's as bad as it gets with a lifted, like a spear tackle. I thought that's a send off. It's already like whatever it was, 6-0, 10-0, game over. But it was only 10. And then Warrior Hargraves got 10 later. And you're right, the Eels rode that all the way back to not just being in the game, but being in front. And I'm laying 5.5, and I've got a Roosters team that's, as I just like look at the timing, the Roosters team is not even in front with 20 to go. And when the Roosters did score, they're only up by 4 points until the 75th minute. So it was actually a game where we got a late try to cover the line and had to survive the final play of the match where the Eels, they're down 10 and there's nothing they can do to win the game, but they go a full backline shift, and it looks like obviously there's Kelma Tuolungi and then there's Blaze Taulungi, right? Taulungi on the wing. It looks like he's going to score for all money, and Teddy makes a great try saver. And I mean, I could already see the future. Taulungi makes the spectacular acrobatic diving try, and Moses slots it from the sideline, and Roosters win by 4, and the best bet goes down. So I am grateful for that effort play by Teddy, where he didn't need to do it because the game was sealed, but it shows what kind of player he is, and I'll definitely take it.
And that's the thing when you do play the line, the whole 80 minutes comes into it. It's not just a head-to-head bet where, Teddy could go, we've already won this game. Allow that try to occur, save his body, whatever his reasons might be. And then, everyone that's bet on that line has now lost. So when you do bet on the line, and you have these champion mentality sides like the Roosters who keep going for the full 80, and certainly it always helps when you're on them there. Let's move to...
And we can read that comment there. Daniel says, I'm not giving credit to the Tigers because of my best bet. They fielded the youngest team in NRL history, you clown. Like, that is a fair point. When you win a game and you fielded like such an inexperienced team, there's positives to take out of that. And there was toughness. If I give the Tigers any credit, like there was a bit of scrambled defense and there were moments where the Tigers were on their line and were reasonably tough just to hang in the game. But my point is that if the Titans had just been able to execute like half of the clean line breaks, like the Tigers are giving up line breaks 10 meters out from the Titans line from just one-off runs. Like the Tigers did not play a great game. And against, as you said, against any other team in the comp would have been down 20 or 30. So I know they can do a big victory lap and they can talk about how great they are and what a famous win it was to avoid a 10 straight losing streak. But my point is, like, it could be fool's gold for Tigers fans just because you probably should have been down 20 or 30 by the hour mark and then you wouldn't have come back. That's all. But there's two sides to everything. The fact that they kept it a lot closer and they were able to take advantage of all the possession that was handed over. And again, when a team makes like 7 errors out of 8 sets, the other side of the coin is, well, the defense forced the errors. So, I appreciate all that. I've just, am I a little bit salty for the bet? I'll accept that. I'm only human. I am a little bit as well.
I don't want to talk about that game for one more second, so let's go game 7. Man,
sorry to bring that game up again. I'm sure you would be happy to ignore that comment. But we don't ignore any comments, positive or negative. We come here and we take our medicine.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that one up again, Daniel. I appreciate it, mate. Game 7, Manly beat the Dragons 30 points to 14. Unfortunate start for both sides here. The Dragons lose Sulu during the kickoff. He's one of their outside attacking weapons. But then what happened to the Seagulls from there? Paseka gets out with a thumb injury. Garrett goes for a head injury, passes it, then fails the next one. Sipley goes down to a knee injury. Corey Waddell limps off, and all of a sudden, they're playing with 13 fit players. I know they had Corey Waddell come on later and kind of give Nathan Brown a 5-10 minute blow, but, they were playing with 13 fully healthy players. One moment I do want to point out, and I'm coming at this from a Dragons better point of view. I'll put that out there. Ola Kawatu, when he scored the second try, zero consistency from the bunker. Ben Trbojevic, I believe, clearly stopped inside the line, and the try is only awarded because Kyle Flanagan tries to brush past him and make the tackle. Like, we talk about Kyle Flanagan milking like he did later in the game. At least have the IQ to milk in the right situation. Like, just fall over there, and that's not a try. And my evidence for that is Ben Trbojevic does it 5 minutes later in a non-scoring situation, and suddenly it's a penalty to the Dragons because he stops in the line that time. So thought that was inconsistent there. But Manly hit, like I said, Manly hit halftime with 13 players healthy. And I just thought, I was on the Dragons. I thought there's no way I can lose this bet from here. The Dragons, they lack polish in this game. That's probably a nice way of putting it. Ben Hunt kicks a 40-20. They don't really put the Seagulls under any pressure in that set. And then on the last tackle, he puts it crossfield to Lomax, almost kicks it dead, and it's the easiest 7-tackle set you'll ever see. They then fail to turn up defensively, and Manly score that next set. So you go from a 40-20, which is like, one of the most hyped things for a footy team. It's like a 3-point in the NBA. Let's go, boys. Everyone's G'd up. The halfback then, who suddenly was a kicking god a second ago, puts in one of the worst fifth tackle options, and you can see the next set. Like, it just draws life out of your side. Flanagan staying get down, although I was going for the Dragons quite obviously. I didn't think there was much in that hit at all, and I think he did deserve to go for a head injury assessment. I hope that consistency is here to stay, because then we might see milking taking a little bit out of the game.
No, I agree. Like, it shouldn't have been an HIA because it was so obvious he was milking it. But at the same time, that's what you get for milking it, to be fair.
100% agree with you, mate. And it's really hard to not say horrible things about the Dragons here, because I don't want to come off across as salty. I probably wouldn't feel this. I'll be completely honest. I probably wouldn't feel this strongly if I didn't have my hard earned on it. But in terms of the game itself, particularly if I just, narrow in on that second half. What were the Dragons thinking? You have 17 healthy players versus 13, and the whole half of football was one up, kick for field position. Manly would come off their own end. Cherry Evans kicking it on second out to Saab. Nathan Brown off the back fence, offload. The team with 13 players was the one that was playing expansive, and they didn't have anyone on the bench to replace them. So I just don't understand the Dragons' IQ there. I thought that was really, really bad. Why not make them work in defense? Throw the ball left to right. Look for safer offloads. Look for second phase play. Move the footy. Instead, the offloads that the Dragons went for were just horrible. Like getting dragged back to your own line and throwing it off the ground this high for that person to knock it on and all sorts of crazy stuff. I was super frustrated watching the Dragons in this one, but I will say for the Seagulls, that is an awesome victory. That is so gutsy. Brilliant to turn up for your home fans and do that because as a Dragons better in this game, I thought at halftime I was home and hosed with you guys only having 13, and the effort and the resiliency the Seagulls shown was so good to see from their club, and they needed that victory. It was awesome to see, mate. How did you see that one?
Yeah, that's the balance I'm trying to always strike with the recap show. Like you guys know, we've shared our best bets. I put everything on the line each week, and then I ride these plays. So naturally, when I talk about the game, I do talk about it from my experience, from my lens, what I'm really pleased about, what I'm so disappointed in. But at the same time, you also might not have got to see every game, or if you did, you want to hear like objective opinions on it. You want to hear how the game went, not just us complaining about why the team we backed, didn't win and giving no credit to the teams that beat our bets and, saying they're lucky. Like, was Dragons plus 6.5 or plus 7.5 today a good bet? On one hand, well, it did close in at 5.5. On one hand, well, they were in front at half time. In the second half, they absolutely looked like they would win the game, let alone like to catch 6.5, 7.5 in a game that's level. The opponent's like shot to pieces, has nobody on the bench. Like, I doubt that the Dragons have got no right to lose that game, but let alone to lose it by more than a try. It's just not going to happen. That's brutal for me. That's why I was so deflated afterwards. But on the other hand, you got a Manly team that won by 14 points and had so much misfortune, had so much go against them. How can you say the Dragons were a good bet? And that's where, once again, I go like, what is happening? When I'm against the Dragons a week ago, they come out in the second half where they are down double digits to the Tigers, and they play the most inspired footy you've ever seen. And Zach Lomax has flames come and scores a hat trick and kicks 10 from 10. And that's 2 days after an origin. But then the very next week, where I need you, Zach Lomax, you're dropping the ball in a put down. You're dropping every bomb you contest for. You're kicking 1 from 3. Now, you mentioned the bunker. I'm a little bit all over the place. Yes, I am salty. Okay, you got an issue with a try to Manly allowed. You know what I've got an issue with? I've got an issue with someone in the bunker that does not know the knock-on rule. The most simple rule in the game, because Zach Lomax scores off a bomb late in the game that cuts the margin to 4. Anything could happen. Now, I've got a few problems with that. Bomb goes up. Zach Lomax catches it. Zach Lomax grounds it. It's a 4-point game. Manly's low on troops. The Dragons got life, right? The ref is about to blow try, and then maybe it stays a try. The touchy runs in and says, I don't think he grounded it. So the ref says no try because of the grounding. The bunker then looks at it and then rules out the try for the contest. And here's my issue with the contest is Zach Lomax, with his big long arms, the way that he contests every bomb, is reaching well out in front of his body, pulls the ball in. There is a Manly player flapping at the ball who is situated around Lomax's chest. Lomax brings the ball into himself and catches it clean. The bunker says Lomax touches the ball. Yep, you got that right. You got 2 eyes. And it hits a Manly defender, and the Manly defender is in front of him, so it's a knock-on. That's not the knock-on rule, and it hasn't been for 120 years. All you need to tell me is, did he touch the ball? Did it go forward? No, it didn't. It went backwards, the opposite of a knock-on. He pulled it in. I don't know how much more obvious it is. So the bunker is going to tell me something that is not a rule to justify taking the try off Lomax. And I know people might say, well, you lost by 14, so even give them that 6. But obviously it could be so different late in the game. So, look, I don't know what else to tell you. I'm just watching this going I don't ask for the bunker to get these blatantly wrong in my favor, but all I ask is that that person that's a professional, that their only job is to adjudicate the game, knows the rules of the game. I don't get it, but you have to still say, basically along your lines, that that loss is not the bunker's fault. That loss is at the hands of St. George. I talked about Dragons. I think they're the tough team. I was wrong. Manly hung so tough second half. I talked about the duel between Hunt and DCE. DCE wins that by knockout. When DCE got an opportunity on fifth tackle, he threaded the needle for a Jake Trbojevic try. When Ben Hunt had opportunities to put a team away that was really struggling, he came up with like a couple of great plays, but a couple of shockers as well that you talked about. And I'm just waiting for this game to break open all second half. And I'm looking at someone like Sloan. Like at some point, he's going to get the ball off shape and playing tired defenders, and he's just going to cut them to pieces. He's had a great season. He never did,
No.
So the Dragons could not get it done against a team that had basically no right to win. So it's shame on the Dragons. It's a type of game where I don't think both those teams probably going to make the finals. Maybe when it's all said and done, one of them is, and you look back on a game like that, it's a 4-point swing. The Dragons totally bottled it, totally blew it. They have no excuse. And for Manly, a team that has lacked toughness at times and has blown leads, they were incredibly inspired. And again, I saw comments before that, well, you went against Tigers at Leichhardt, you went against Manly at Brookie. Like, I don't think it's that simple. Tigers haven't been covering many games at Leichhardt. Now, Manly's record at Brookie is really strong, but I don't think they're an autoplay. However, you do have to respect, like, that is part of what home field is all about. I think I lost a game a week ago where I was against the Bulldogs, and they were clearly inspired by that home crowd because, once again, everything went against them. And I thought we were sitting pretty with a lead and a Dogs team that just could not have copped more bad breaks all game, but they somehow found a way to win it. And I had to watch the exact same thing with my fifth bet again this week. I had to watch a team that it made no sense for them to keep fighting, keep turning up, and it made no sense whatsoever for them to win 13 plus, but they did.
Winnie, I've actually flicked you through to your Facebook the Game 2 official Blues squad. It's dropped if you want to bring it up at the end of this next game. If not, we can talk about it on the preview show. I'll let you make that decision. Whilst, my final thoughts on that game, mate, like Tyrell Sloan was off. The amount of times he got a risky offload and then just ran straight back into the ruck was crazy. The Dragons lacked a lot of football IQ, and what they lacked in football IQ today, Manly made up for it with toughness and smart decisions. So, in the end, Manly got what they deserved, and Dragons got what they deserved also. Final game of the round, Penrith beat the Knights 26 points to 18. I actually thought the Knights shown a fair bit of fight in this game. They were the weaker side on form, on paper, and of course we can't forget their last game at McDonald Jones, which was absolutely disastrous, where they failed to score a single try in that one. And Penrith were probably solid enough, probably still below where they can play without Nathan Cleary. We've certainly seen them perform better, but solid enough, I would say. Penrith weren't noticeably off or anything like that. The try just before halftime to Penrith, it did remind me a lot of last week against the Storm. Knights had a nice lead there, or maybe it was the week before, sorry, where Knights had a nice
last
lead.
Week, you're right.
It was last week, and Storm at Amy Park, might have been Xavier Coates, raced away and set up a try just before halftime. And I thought, that's really going to sink the Knights' spirit. And the same thing happened here again. But to the Knights' credit, like a lot of sides will be really discouraged if you score in like the final minute or two before and after halftime. I've said for a while that 5 minutes either side is really crucial to the end result from a momentum and I guess, how's that team going to respond to that sort of perspective there? But Knights, full credit there. They didn't let it discourage them. They kept turning up and they fought really hard in that second half. I thought they just couldn't overcome some of the areas where they need to be better in the first half. Where, of course, someone like Jerome Luai was able to take advantage. And the Knights' tries were definitely more so earned. Some of the Panthers ones in the first half are pretty simple stuff. So, again, I think the Knights will look back at that and go, just like the Melbourne game, just like a couple others year, we could have won that. We're in it. We're good enough. But they're just not quite getting over the line now. Meanwhile, Penrith, I mean, what can you say? They're so successful that I'm not even impressed. I just expect them to do this. But it is impressive, and they still do deserve credit. They are able to find these ways to win or hold on in this case. They're such a great footy side. What did you make of this final game, mate?
So Sharp, who should have scored first last week, has a brilliant opening try, gets the Knights on the board. You think, okay, we might have an interesting game here because you could have easily anticipated a blowout. Kind of like last week, there were quite a lot of similarities, especially in the way that Newcastle played. In Melbourne, no one gave them a chance. They're 13-point underdogs. And again today, where was this one? This was
McDonald Jones.
No, this was Newcastle, but still, like the reinforcements were back for Penrith. So again, it was like a 13-point line. The Knights get it in front first, but then the Panthers score the next couple of tries. You're absolutely right. That was a killer moment. 2 minutes before halftime, the Knights have the ball around midfield. Gagai's worried about going into touch and tries to offload infield to Jake Cogger, the former Jack Cogger, the former Panther, who has turned his back on it. Maybe, like, I don't know. You need a bit more awareness because your teammate was about to get thrown over the sideline. But he's turned his back on the play to try and organise, and the offload goes to ground. And it's Sorensen, who was actually injured, who is making the effort play, dives on the ball. And I just knew Penrith would score off that set. And sure enough, they do, and kind of blow the game a bit more wide open. And Penrith scores first in the second half. So then it's a 20-6 lead by Penrith, and you expect that it'll be a bit of a procession. But then there was a period in this game where the Knights just got inspired, a little bit like they did against Melbourne last week, where Newcastle hits back, and it's very much on the back of Bradman Best, who made an outstanding return, pressing his claims for Origin, but unfortunately Latrell has been chosen ahead of him, and Latrell's done a lot right the last 3 weeks too, just has that upside. But nevertheless, like led by Bradman Best in a big way, the Knights have cut this game to 20-18 and had a real opportunity to win and made it a cracking game for the final 20 before Leo to break and puts Edwards over for kind of the clinching try. But still, that Knights fight back got them the cover. It doesn't mean much if you're Newcastle and you've gone, well, we've fought hard. We get a moral victory, but nothing else out of the last 2 weeks against Melbourne and Penrith. But if you're a punter and you've backed Newcastle, they've been the biggest underdog of the week, I think 2 weeks in a row, and they've covered the line each time. So they get credit for that. And again, we just take these Penrith wins for granted, but we shouldn't, because there's something to be said for taking care of business time and time again.
I think Knights or maybe Penrith. I know one of these teams gets a bye next round. If it is the Knights, I'm going to look to them as like the new Titans from earlier this year, where you back them to have a good crack and be in it defensively, so you are confident playing that plus line. I think that's what the Knights, and obviously they're not taking anything away from a moral victory where they hold a side within X amount on a line, but certainly from a punting perspective, it's something we can look at on this show if you agree with that. Now, the State of Origin New South Wales Blues side for Game 2 has dropped. We've got that graphic on screen now, Winnie. I'll go over my reactions, I guess, on my page at a later time. So I'll go to you for rapid fire. I'll run through this team and ask you some questions. Fullback, would you have selected Dylan Edwards or James Tedesco if it was your call?
Yep, Edwards. That's fine. Teddy didn't do enough to take that jersey back. He'd been overlooked, and Edwards deserves the chance.
My next question is Latrell Mitchell there. Was he your selection in the centres, and who was your next best if it wasn't? You had Latrell?
Next, Burton, Bradman Best would have also been good choices there. But I was picking Latrell.
Both great calls there, mate. Halves, Jerome Luai, he remains as the 6. Mitchell Moses replaces Nico Hines. I guess, did you have Matt Burton maybe coming in for the 6 jersey? And I believe you had
Luai
Moses.
Was pretty good today, but I would have picked Burton. But that's my preference. But again, I understand that Madge had that option before game 1. And had he dropped Luai, he would be saying that he didn't feel Luai played well enough, which is debatable, and it was a tough situation. Madge prefers Luai, and you can't begrudge it too much, because Luai is a much maligned player, isn't he? Like, sometimes I think he's the benefactor of a team that's so dominant, and sometimes I think he does just run side to side so much. And I will pose the question, how often has Luai actually stepped up and won Penrith or New South Wales a key game? But on the other side of the coin, he's probably criticised too often. And, World Cup is a good example where he is the lead half for some, or he did lead them to some massive victories. So very justifiable. And I would have picked Moses, as I said before.
Great call there. My question for Mitchell Moses' selection for you is, I believe when Nicho Hynes came in for game one, the Blues wanted him to be Nathan Cleary. It wasn't Nicho Hynes' team per se, like it has been with the Sharks, where his form's been awesome. So do you think Michael Maguire will want Mitchell Moses to come in and play like it's a Nathan Cleary team? Or do you think he wants this side to mold into how Mitchell Moses plays his footy?
Yeah, it's a funny one because Cleary's healthy. Like, it's so obvious that it's a team that's built around Cleary and that Cleary would be your captain. And ideally for New South Wales, Cleary would be your captain for the next 5 or 8 years. But then there's no Cleary. So it's like, well, whoever you put in, they're kind of only keeping the seat warm. But Moses is probably the clear, second best halfback. And so if that's the direction you want to go, then you've got to play to Moses' strengths. So I wonder how much Madge considered, like, whether Luai would suit Moses better than Burton. But I think you're going down with the Mitchell Moses ship one way or another. But you feel he gives you a better chance to win game two. And Madge doesn't know if he's going to be there again next year, right? So he couldn't trust Hynes. He's going to see what Moses can do. And Moses has had wins at Origin level and also had some tough ones. You said broken foot. He had a broken foot this year, but he had a broken back in Origin as well. Played through that. If people recall that one 2 or 3 years ago as well.
I knew he broke something. That's tough. That is Origin tough there. That's a great sign there for the Blues. Hey, a lot of people thought Jake Trbojevic should be dropped or at least lose the captaincy. Were you ever of that train of thought?
Again, I don't think Jake Trbojevic is a standout prop. I think there's several. Like, Yuto Kamano was so good yesterday for the Tigers that he can't crack this team. I wouldn't have picked Lenu, but he totally justified his selection in game one. Haas is the only one that walks in. But you've gone with Jake, you've named him captain, and to drop him from the team would be an embarrassing look. So I think you have to trust that there. You've realistically named a captain for the series, really, unless there's injury.
Yep, well said there. Cameron Murray comes straight back in a starting role. He hasn't started in the NRL yet, came off the bench this round. Do you think he did enough in that game to convince you he should be there again?
So that's the big one, because I read the rumours to come into this pod to talk about it, and I did not know that was going to be the case. I had heard Madge really rates Murray and was thinking of picking him on the bench, and to me that made a lot of sense because he's just such a class player, Cam Murray, and if you pick him on the bench, he can come in and he can play loose middle forward. He can obviously play lock, or he can cover an edge. But Madge has dropped Cam McInnes, which again, I think McInnes was partly there for his connection with Hynes, which now you don't have. I don't think McInnes. He's dropped him entirely. He's kept Yo, because if you thought McInnes was better than Yo, then maybe you'd shift McInnes to the bench and Yo would get dropped. But Yo's remain on the bench, and it's a straight swap Cam Murray in for Cam McInnes. Cam Murray is the best lock New South Wales have available to them, I believe. It's just tough because he's been out for this period of time. But I guess getting that game under his belt, if you're going to ask me, did he do enough on Friday? Look, not really. Only played a few minutes and it was hard. It's not like I could say, oh, yeah, Cam Murray dominated. Cam Murray wasn't a big reason why Souths won, but he is picked on what he's capable of. And he's that classic type of player that you want in Origin, right? That the teammate that you want, because like he rips in. And I also will say, I think it's very underrated how when New South Wales has failed in the past, often it's been when Murray wasn't there. Like, nobody talks about this, but the 2020 series where New South Wales lost the unlosable series, everyone forgets Murray was injured in game one, and they couldn't quite get over that. Murray was knocked out 1 minute into the decider in 2022. Like, had he been involved in a couple of those deciders, the 2020 decider, the 2022 decider, it could be a different game. New South Wales missed him a lot. And when he finally got a chance to be picked at starting lock last year, New South Wales won that game too.
Yeah, he's always done really well with his opportunities at Origin level, Murray. So I think it's good inclusion. Last change we'll talk about, Hudson Young dropped for the more versatile Connor Watson. Do you like that move?
Yeah, to me, Hudson Young's a good player, Origin-style player, but he wasn't setting the comp on fire, so he wasn't a player that was just demanding to be picked and you couldn't leave him out. So it was the obvious player that would be shifted, because if you looked at like who else was on the bench, like Hamole, who was unreal again today, unfortunately for me, you're not dropping Isaiah Yeo. Lenu gave them exactly what they wanted off the bench last year, so last game. So therefore, Hudson Young, who plays second row, and there's plenty of other second rowers already in this team, and it's not common to have necessarily multiple edge forwards on your bench. That was the logical player who might be dropped. However, clearly, I was just looking for extra versatility. Like if it's me, I'd probably pick Burton, because I think then I've got my cover of my backline and my halves, and I still feel like you could play Burton as a lock. You could play him in the middle if you really needed to at a pinch. But clearly, no one can argue with the fact that Watson can play 9, 13, or several positions in the back line. At least he has in the past when he was a little bit younger. I don't know if he'd go that well if he had to be thrown out centre or something in an Origin game, but he is a type of player that has played a lot of different positions, including halves in his career.
The other thing I'm interested in is like Watson provides very good versatility, but I always feel that when we talk Origin, my 18th man, in case I need to play, I want it to be someone like Matt Burton that can cover multiple backline positions, because I believe they're typically more hard to replace than a forward position. They're more specialist in the defense, etc. Whereas in the middle, it's more hard work and working with the men beside you. For the Maroons, it worked out in game one, having a forward there at the 18th man in Felice Kafusi. But I would have thought, Mitchell Barnett currently, I mean, even if you bring Luke Keary into that, that's really only giving you halves coverage there. So they probably could have.
Yeah, honestly, I completely agree. Burton is the logical 18th man, because if you get something bad happens to one of your spine players, particularly 6 or 7 or 1 or whatever, they're not always the player that you've got like for like on the bench. But if it is if anything happens with multiple HIAs or with a player on report for a hit, you can activate the 18th man. But exactly. I do wonder, I noticed that Burton is not even in this squad. And I have to wonder if they just felt bad because the Dogs are playing again this week, and if they didn't want to make Burton an 18th man for a third time in less than 12 months and for him to miss a Dogs game. Like I almost feel that which shouldn't be the way you think, because you should pick the team that gives you the best chance to win. But I'd have to suggest if Burton was the right man for the job for 18th man in game 1, why would he not be for game 2?
Two thoughts on that. Let's say Dylan Edwards unfortunately goes down during the game like Walsh did in game 1. You just shift Latrell to fullback and you put Matty Burton in at the centres. That would work absolutely. If that same situation happens now, you've got Connor Watson at centre where he's not as effective, and Mitchell Barnett joining your interchange. So very interesting stuff there. And my other takeaway,
what if something happens to Mitch Moses? Okay,
yes.
So your halfback's going to be Connor Watson now, is it?
Or
Connor Watson's going to play 6 and Luai 7. Right, but if you had Burton, you could bring him straight to the halves to partner whoever else was still standing.
Mate, it sounds like we're both seeing that one the exact same there. And if he has been withdrawn because the Doggies were unhappy with him being unavailable because he was 18th man, to that, the person I feel most sorry for is actually Matt Burton, because they adjusted the rules this year where 18th men also get the match payment. So poor Birdo's just missed out.
If anyone was complaining, it wasn't Birdo. Birdo's like, I don't have to play and I get the money.
Mate, I'll take 30 grand and pull the bench any day.
Birdo, because the Dogs won by 30 anyway. But I just have to suspect that complaint to the NRL somehow has had an effect. Now, I know we've talked way too long, but I guess some people just, want to hear this discussion. And, now that the Origin teams have either been selected or Queensland will be tomorrow, that's what everyone is, at the forefront of everyone's minds. We don't have the Queensland team because it's not official. But from what I've heard, it's going to be the exact same as game 1. However, Hopgood is in doubt. And I'm just going to assume that Kaufusi did a job and was really good again on Friday, and he was 18th man. He would come in to Hopgood's bench spot because he can cover, middle and edge as well. However, it wouldn't be crazy to me if Billy tosses a little surprise out there. And I would just actually wonder whether Cobbo's too good to have on the bench again, and whether you start Cobbo and rejig the bench, just because yeah, you look like a genius when you lose an outside back 7 minutes in. But do you really want Cobbo on the bench, when the game is being decided, and you're 40, 60 minutes in and he hasn't come on yet, even though they reckon they got a secret plan? I would, suggest Billy could tweak that. But other than that, we shouldn't see any surprises tomorrow, should we? You haven't heard any other rumours?
No, I don't think so. Just Jermaine Hopgood under that injury cloud with a nerve injury in his back. Nerves are a weird injury. Like Thomas Flegler's career is literally in doubt at the moment from a nerve injury. They're tough to manage. And he thought it was all good, went into the game backing up for the Eels on Monday. It wasn't all good, but I do mirror your thoughts there, where it's logical for Felice Kafusi to enter that bench spot. Who becomes 18th man? It could be Brendan Piakura if he wants a forward. If not, I think you'll find 18th man would become Ezra Mam, who was in their extended squad next time. Unfortunate for Dave Fafita. I know a lot of people are off him, but if he had played against the Tigers, I think he would have had a big game, or could have had a big game. If there's 9 line breaks in that game, Dave's going to be 1 or 2 of those, right? And he could have really pressed his case. So unfortunate for him, but we will have to wait and see for that Maroon side.
How often, I'm sure you were thinking the same thing as me yesterday, where it was like pretty wet and, the Titans had all this momentum, and you I couldn't help but think, imagine if Fafita was playing this afternoon. Like, that he would have thrown someone off him and bowled somebody over and helped the Titans be more clinical and probably win. But again, I might just be whinging at this point. So, and certainly we're 2 of the most butthurt people in the game right now this weekend, and we've probably said enough so far. So we should probably check out, because we're going to be back in under 48 hours to talk about the upcoming round 16 anyway.
Absolutely, guys. We will see you Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. live in all the same places to preview round 16 of the NRL season and hand out our best bets. So from myself, thank you very much for being with us here on the show tonight. And Winnie, it's over to you to say farewell and hit us with the famous last words.
Thanks for tuning in as always, guys. Have a great week. We'll be back. We'll see you next Tuesday.